All right, awesome. We are now live. I'm gonna wait to have you guys start coming in, and we're going to invite Dr. Joel Gator. Well, I'm so excited about today's live. Hi, I'm starting to see people come in. Hi, I see Dr. Gator. Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm gonna invite Dr. Gator in and get started. Invite. All right, awesome. We're going to get started. So, some quick announcements while we have you here. There's so many exciting things. Hi, Dr. Gator, how
Hi.
are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, good. I'm going to run through some very quick announcements and jump right in. Okay.
Awesome.
All right. So we have so many exciting releases coming up. The first is YouTube. You guys have been asking us forever. We will have our YouTube up this week, starting tomorrow. You can see this exact live, be able to pause it, rewind it, things like that. We will also have YouTube specific content that is completely separate and has nothing to do with Instagram, and you will only be able to find it there. So be on the lookout tomorrow, and please join us on YouTube. Also, our body awareness trainers are starting this week. You're going to be able to train with us in stories only. So make sure you're watching our stories, but we're going to be releasing body awareness trainers that help you breathe better, help you create better self-control for aggression, and all kinds of tools that we have that will increase body awareness. And lastly, we have learning tools coming from CREATE, original learning tools that we're going to be releasing this holiday season. That's going to help parents change behavior, start better routines, grow growth mindsets. And these are all permanent tools that you're going to be able to reuse for all of your needs, right? All right, so we are so excited to be with Dr. Joel Gator today on topics that are so important to our health as adults, but also how we are parenting kids in terms of healthcare. Right, so we're going to go through a lot of different topics, and I love your position. I love what you educate on, and our parents need more voices like yours. They need to be exposed to what you're talking about. So I'm going to quickly introduce you, or allow you to introduce yourself, and we're going to get started.
Well, thanks for having me on. I love everything that you do as well. So it's an honor to be here. And I guess, going back a little bit for me, so I'm a pediatrician. Most people would call me an integrative pediatrician. So to me, I did all the regular training, but I got a little bit frustrated with the regular system. So I started learning about natural medicine and integrative medicine. I'm not personally against Western medicine at all. I think that there's a time and a place, and we have created all sorts of magical medications that could save your life that didn't exist just a few years ago. So I'm not against any of that. I just think that there are so many other tools out there in the world that can be useful for kids. And so I try to integrate those together and balance the best of both worlds and try to use natural remedies first whenever it makes sense. And that's my general background. And I practice in Los Angeles. I have a pediatric practice here. And then I've been doing a lot of stuff online too at Raising Amazing Plus and here on Instagram, just to try to get more information out there to people and try to answer whatever questions parents have.
Yeah. I really love that, because I think with everything that is new and maybe innovative and scientific, we can go to extremes. And that's why I love your approach. It's very measured, and also it does not completely sidestep any half, right? So there's a place and time where each has their strength. And I appreciate that mindset. And it's really the balanced mindset that is the healthiest, right? And parents need to have more tools to strengthen themselves in creating that more balanced mindset. So let's jump right into your controversial statement of parents having the sole or the main responsibility as being advocates for their children's health. Right. So what do you see that made you have this stance? What made you kind of like, we need to have a stronger perception in this way?
I think the first thing to look at is just the statistics. And if you look at how many kids are sick and how many kids have a chronic disease these days, the numbers are scary. It's like 50% of children have a chronic disease. Above that amount, maybe 60% of adults have a chronic disease, maybe more. So that's scary in of itself. And it means that the system isn't working. There's something going on that we're just missing, or things have changed in a way where kids are developing diseases they never had before. And that's scary. And so when you look at the medical system right now, and doctors are good people, pediatricians are good people. They're there to help you, of course. I'm not against doctors at all, of course. But the system is such that you just don't have the time to spend to discuss the things that you really need to discuss, to try to think about prevention, try to focus on lifestyle in a way that you need to, talking about things like diet and exercise and sleep and stress. You might only have 2 or 3 minutes with your doctor, so there's not going to be the time to spend an hour going through your diet and everything like that. So you can't assume that the medical system or going to your doctor for a quick visit is going to be the thing that's going to help you with a chronic disease. I mean, of course, you go to the doctor, you have a cold, they can help you with those kind of things. And you can certainly ask questions about it, but you need to spend more time. And so that's why I think it comes down to the parents or the caregivers or the people that are spending all the time with that child, because we have forgotten that everyday decisions matter and these things add up, and the choices that you make and the foods that you purchase and what you have in your home and what you do every day and getting your kids outside and exercising, all these things matter for your health. And the only people that are going to be responsible for that are the parents or the caregivers. That's who's, especially as the kids are younger, you're the one setting up their lifestyle. You're the one buying the food. And you have to take that responsibility on and learn about these things so that way we can make the healthiest choices possible for your family. It doesn't mean you have to, go live on a commune somewhere and grow all your own food every day. You can do that if you want to. But there are many things that you can do to make healthier choices or informed choices, or read a label and pick the better version of chips or pick the better version of whatever. And these things add up over time. And if we do that, then we're going to minimize our kids' risks of getting sick. Doesn't mean you still can't get sick, but it will give them the best chance to be resilient and to not get sick.
Yeah. And there is a wide view that Western medicine is very reactive, and after the fact, its approach is to patch you up with surgeries and pills, and instead of being preventative. Now, here's the controversial question: do you believe that parents are thinking in the same way when it comes to health? So you deal with it when it becomes a problem, as opposed to, like you're saying, having a holistic preventative approach that is always kind of aware of the possibilities. Yeah. Do you think parents have the same confusion as the medical system?
I think so. I think that most people are not aware of how the decisions they make can affect their health or their children's health. I mean, things have changed so much in the last 50 years that a lot of issues that are around today weren't even really existent or very minimal at the time when we were growing up. So we weren't really thinking about those things. And yeah, I think like most things, we're reactive. I think that's not unreasonable in general, but I don't think that most people realize just how bad it's gotten in terms of health, especially for kids. And I do think that if people were aware, they would take common sense steps to do what they can within reason, within what they can afford, to prevent their child from getting sick. If you realize that 1 out of 2 kids will have a chronic disease, then that could hit home, like, all right, well, what can I do to not be that next statistic? Or when your kid does get, eczema, allergies, whatever it is, then you definitely start thinking about it and maybe start preventing from other things, or for your second kid, or whatever it may be. But it's becoming so common that I think it is time that we need to raise the alarm bells and say, like, yes, we do need to think about this. Everybody needs to think about it. You need to think about it if you're thinking about getting pregnant. You need to think about it if you are pregnant. You need to think about it when you have the baby, because everything that you do, even right now, that affects your child, that affects their future, and it's cumulative. And we're surrounded by so many chemicals and toxins as it is. And if you're not doing everything that you can, then there's very little chance that you're not going to get some sort of chronic disease. I mean, we used to be worried about infections, right? We used to die when you're 30 or 40 for the most part, because you would get sick with tuberculosis or whatever it is. We got much better at sanitation. We got much better at medicines. We got much better at saving people's lives. So of course there's still diseases out there that we're worried about, but a lot of what kills people now is heart disease and cancer and things like that. And so we have to reframe how we think. We have to reframe healthcare, but the system's not set up for that, because the issues you can't answer in 2 minutes. You can't go through it in 5 seconds. So it takes more time and takes more thought.
Yeah. Yeah, I see some questions in the comments. I will be asking them, so you guys. I absolutely agree with what you're actually. Let's just ask the question. I think this one's going to be a little controversial, but a parent does want to know. How do you advise parents with vaccine schedules or maybe vaccine hesitation? How do you recommend, one, how they would ask a question to a pediatrician or a doctor in a way that's not offensive, right? How do they approach that conversation? And then what do you advise for a parent that's worried about it?
Great question. So, I mean, we get a lot of questions in the office about shots and medications and really, anything in that realm. And, first of all, especially speaking online, right? I can't give anybody medical advice. I can't tell people what to do. Everyone has to make decisions for themselves. And, when it comes to vaccines, the only thing that you can really recommend is the CDC schedule, right? Because that's what's been studied. That's what's been promoted in the American Academy of Pediatrics and CDC in general. And that is what the general recommendations are. A lot of parents, certainly these days are a little bit more hesitant when it comes to shots, want to do their own research, want to have discussions. And I think that's reasonable. I think you should be able to have conversations with your practitioners. And I think if you do have questions, then it is reasonable to have research and have discussions with your doctor to bring it up. You want to bring it up in the correct way. You don't want to say, I read on a parenting group or this or that. You want to say, like, I've done research, I've looked into this, and here are my concerns, and have a discussion. If your doctor's not willing to have discussions with you, then you want to make sure you find a doctor that is, so you can feel confident in making the decisions that are best for your family. Because there are pros and cons with any decision that you make. Every medication you take has risks, and anything that you don't do has its own risks. And so you have to weigh, the pros and the cons for that. I actually did create a course on Raising Amazing Plus about shots and about, kind of thinking through these decisions, not telling people what to do, because again, I can't do that, but you can think through it a little bit more. You can look at what information is available out there through the CDC and the risks from these diseases, and try to weigh the pros and the cons for yourself, for your own family, because the conversation can be kind of frustrating these days. It can be pretty divisive, and it can be like, you're crazy if you do it or you're crazy if you don't, and there's no middle ground. And in general, the families that I take care of in the office are not extreme in that sense. They're just curious, and they have questions, and they have concerns, and they don't want to do anything that's going to harm their child, whether it's doing or not doing it. They want to keep their kids safe, and that's what we all want, right? And so there just isn't a lot of information easily accessible out there. So I tried to put some stuff together for people, so you can check that out if you want to on my website. But if not, then I think it's, again, go back to what you're saying, having a discussion with your doctor, expressing your concerns, and letting them talk to you about it. And that may mean you book a specific visit just to talk about that, because you may not have the time. So you'd be like, all right, I want to talk about this. I have concerns. Or if you're thinking about getting a new doctor, if you're having a baby, if this is something that's on your mind, then have it be a part of the initial interview with a doctor. Like, don't go to a doctor that's not willing to have this conversation if you are concerned about it. If you're not concerned about it, go whichever doctor. But if you want to talk to somebody about doing anything but what the general recommendations are, then you should make sure you find a doctor that's willing to talk to you about the pros and the cons of those decisions. And that way you can weigh it for yourself and understand what your risks might be with any decision that you make.
Okay. And how would you recommend a parent get started? Like, let's say, approach it in this way. I wouldn't get offended as a doctor if a parent came to me and said X, right? So how would you recommend?
It depends on the doctor. So I think the big thing is doing your research to understand what the doctor and the office's beliefs are, because there are many offices that they will only go on the regular schedule, and that's their belief, and their belief is, this is what's been studied, and this is what I believe in, and so this is what the families, and they don't really want to have a lot of discussions around that. Other doctors are open to it. They'll say on their website, or you can ask their people, that they're open to different schedules, or whatever it is that they're going to be willing to do. So that's the key step right there, is finding someone that you can speak to, and then just approaching it honestly and saying, like, look, I'm not against this, I'm not anti whatever, I'm not discussion about X, Y, or Z. Here are my questions. And I think if you approach it from that standpoint, and you ask your questions, you come in prepared, you come in with research, as opposed to, I heard this from my friend, or I think it turns the doctor off when you say, like, oh, I read on Facebook this, or oh, I saw an influencer on Instagram saying blah blah blah. It's like, okay, fine. But if you're like, well, I read about this, and here's the concern that I have, and here's the book that I read, and I just want to talk about this, then they should be willing to talk to you. Doctors are there to teach. So a good doctor is going to explain it to you. That you might not agree, you might want to do something different, but they should be able to give you their opinion and at least explain to you why they believe what they believe. And then you have to make decisions based on that. If you don't agree, then you find somebody else that you can work with, because at the end of the day, you want to have a doctor that that you can believe in and you can trust and has somewhat similar beliefs to you, and that goes for both. There goes for the doctor. The doctors want to have patients that don't agree with the way that they feel like they're going to keep your kid the healthiest. So I think that people sometimes feel bad, like they don't want to fire their doctor, or they don't want to switch doctors, and I promise you that you're not going to offend anybody. There are so many kids, not enough doctors, so there's no shortage of patients for almost any doctor these days. So what doctors want, I think, and certainly what I want, is I want families that want to be in the practice and like the way that we do things, and kind of value my opinion and value the conversation that we have as a team. And I would not want a patient in my practice that doesn't agree with, is like way in some other direction, disagreeing with things. I don't want that. I want them to be happy, right? I want them to be able to talk to me. So I don't think you should feel bad. I think it's fine. People switch doctors all the time. So it's not a us. So you find a doctor that you can talk to.
Yeah, I love that. I think the main takeaways are to be proactive and have the conversations before the days of the visit where it's supposed to happen, et cetera, et cetera. And also not to be shy about switching up, and making sure that you meet eye to eye, and your training. So can you please say it one more time? It's Raising Greatness. You have a course.
The website's raisingamazingplus.com. Yeah.
Okay, so Raising Amazing, we're going to do one more go around at the end of the live, but this topic is within your course. And so if the parent that did ask the question, if you're interested, please head over there. The link is most likely also in your bio. Okay. Awesome. So let's move on to the next question. So this one is on the repost that we had. I loved that you said that parents need to be tougher and stronger advocates for their children's healthcare. But can you give me a few examples of maybe a moment when you thought a parent needed to be stronger, or maybe a moment when you thought a parent came off a little too strong? It could be like either a particular topic or an example that you remember.
Yeah. So one of the big ways that I think it's important to be an advocate for your kid's health is in terms of medication. So like antibiotics. I think that is something that we use way too many medications for kids. We're way too fast to prescribe. Certainly if you go to like an urgent care, and you say, oh, my kid's ear's hurting, they almost always leave with a prescription. And medications have side effects, and antibiotics kill bad bacteria and good bacteria. And so you have long-term complications. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use it if you need it, but we are way too fast to give kids medications. And one of the areas where you can advocate is by discussing at the time with your doctor, do we really need this medication? And I think that's an important question to ask when a doctor is giving you medication, especially if you're going to someone who's not your primary doctor, like an urgent care, where you go in and you say, okay, their ear's hurting, okay, here's an antibiotic, but what's it for? What are we using it for? Do we need it? And if you advocate and you push back a little bit, then a lot of times they'll say, well, the ears are a little bit red. I don't know if you need to do it today, but here's the prescription just in case it gets worse. Here you go. Or they have a cough. Well, here's a prescription. Do you think they have a pneumonia? No, I don't think so. It's probably just a virus, but I'm giving it to you anyways. And you can save your kid a prescription, because the vast majority of infections that kids get are viral. 99%, 90+% are going to be a virus if medication doesn't help. So when you're just getting antibiotics left and right, a little pushback can help sometimes, and having a discussion of whether the doctor really feels like you need it. And sometimes they'll be like, yeah, it's strep, we really do need it, we don't want to have a long-term complication. But other times and many times they will say, well, I don't know that you need it right now, hold on to it for a day or two, see if it gets better. And most of the time it does. And I have seen this through my course of my career, where I used to work at a big hospital, and seeing the prescriptions given out every day, all the time, and like knowing every single prescription off by heart really easily because you just do it all the time, versus being in private practice where people don't want medications as much and barely ever giving a prescription, maybe once every few weeks, and having to look everything up now because it's so rare that I need to do it. But it's the same kids, right? But it's just a difference of a value and opinion on using a medication as a last resort versus a first. So that's one area that I think you can really push and advocate for your kids.
I think that's so important, especially with, I mean, you can answer this, but do having too many prescriptions, especially early on, then impact a child's ability to have those antibiotics be effective as adults or as they're getting older? Because I know that that is a problem, right?
It's a big problem in society in general because diseases are smart and they learn how to get around through mutations. They learn how to get around antibiotics or antivirals. And so the more that you use a medicine, the more chance that we're going to have antibiotic resistance, it's called. So for yourself or for everybody, it's a problem. The more we use things, the more we use it when we don't need to, the more likely at some point we're not going to have to use that medicine anymore because the disease is going to learn how to get around it. So yes, it matters, and everything comes at a cost, right? Nothing is for free, right? So you take an antibiotic, and if it saves your life, great. But what is the cost of that? And if you give somebody a medication when they don't need it, say for example for a kid that has a cough that's a virus, then the only thing you're doing is giving them side effects. They might not get any, but you're not doing any good, and you're potentially doing harm, and you are affecting their gut to some degree. And for some kids, if you do that 10, 20, 30 times, if you're giving medication every month, then that could downstream cause and effect, increase inflammation, and end up being an autoimmune disease or whatever. I don't know. That may or may not happen, but that's what we're seeing. And I think that's one factor in kids being very sick these days because they're just getting a lot of medication. We're turning to it very fast, and kids are on medication every day. So I think that is one big factor. But again, it's not that you shouldn't do a medication. Sometimes you should do a medication. It's just that we overuse it, I think.
Yeah, I think that is actually one of the most actionable pieces that will probably be in this entire life, and so important. So basically, when do you feel like a parent should take a step back? All right. So obviously, like you're saying, there is times when, like for example, strep throat, it can get worse in ways that is just not worth it. So what are an occasion when parents really fight, but they need to take a step back and maybe grow awareness a little bit more?
So let's see. So I think, especially for new parents, one of the areas where they fight a lot, where they need to take a step back, is an understanding of what is normal in terms of kids getting sick versus not. I think there's a feeling like there should be some magic where kids are never going to get sick. They're never going to get colds. They're going to get better in a couple of days. And they get really worried, and come in 20 times and they go to daycare and they're getting sick all the time. They think it has immune deficiency. So I think that, trusting your doctor sometimes when they say, oh, it's just a cold, it'll get better. Oh, it's just a couple of colds in a row, it'll get better. If your gut says it's something else, fine, that's fine. Sometimes it is, but kids get sick. And I feel like parents are so nervous these days about minor colds, and, maybe with good reason given what we've been through the last couple of years. But the reality is kids get sick, and I think parents need to step back and have conversations with their doctor about what to look for, when to really be worried, when to really be stressed, because I think that, and I've seen even in my office, that parents are very, very nervous. They don't trust their own instincts these days, and sometimes don't even trust the medical system in general anymore. And if you ask the right questions, and whether a doctor is afraid or not, they're going to tell you when they're worried. And if they're not worried, we've seen a lot of kids being sick. So there's a big difference between a kid who's really sick and a little bit sick. So I think that's a good area where we can kind of sometimes push back a little bit and de-stress a little bit, because kids get colds.
Yeah, for sure. I think most of the issue is a problem of conversations between the two, and that then leads to a lack of trust that then brings the rest of the issues. And I love that you said that, just move on to another doctor if it's not a good match, but don't avoid the conversations, because that is where the problems actually begin.
Yeah.
So
I want to say, I think one of, if not the biggest problem in the last few years, has been communication. I think there has been such a lack of transparency in the medical world. There's been such a lack of communication, and it's such a movement towards telling people what to do instead of discussing things and providing options and letting people choose what the best for them is within reason. And so I agree with you. I think there's been this huge push that all of medicine is bad, all of pharmaceuticals is bad, and that's not the case. But I mean, it's not unreasonable that people think that way right now. I think it's been a really tough few years, and people are not willing to have conversations anymore. And there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to have a conversation about every topic, including vaccines, especially with your doctor. If you have concerns, and you should be able to talk about them, they should be able to tell you what they think. There's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that. And it doesn't mean that you have to agree, right? They might have an opinion, you might have a different one, but you should be able to have a communication, a discussion about the topic, and agree to disagree. I don't like.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the extremes in healthcare right now help no one. Absolutely help no one. So, what issues? Okay, so now let's transition over to food because I love your stance on food. I think it's so important, and what goes into our body. Our focus is body awareness for our charity, and so we speak about all things body, including the gut and how the gut impacts behavior, mental health issues, health in general, like you're going to speak on. So I really gravitated towards your work on food. Okay, so how important is food in terms of what you're seeing come into the office? What are you seeing come into the office, and how do you pinpoint it towards food?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I don't know, like number one, number two, most important thing in our lives. So when I talk about the foundations of health, I call it the seeds of health, being stress, environment and toxins, exercise, diet, and sleep. So those to me are the foundations of what keeps you healthy. And if I was to really pinpoint the major issues when it comes to chronic disease, I would really focus on diet, so food and toxins. I mean, we're not eating the food that we need to be eating. We're not getting the nutrients that we need to be healthy, and we're surrounded by too many chemicals and toxins that our body just can't handle it. And if you think of our body like, I don't know, a bucket with water flowing in, and the water's inflammation in your body, and then usually it's kind of flowing in, there's a hole at the bottom, it's all flowing out, and everything's going fine. But if it's flowing in too fast, there's too much inflammation, if your body can't handle it, eventually it overflows. And that's what I think is happening right now. We just don't have the nutrients that we need to keep our body healthy, to keep our bucket healthy, and we have too many toxins pouring in at the same time, and it just overflows at some point and turns into some sort of, inflammation or infection or disease or whatever it is. And our food's crappy. I mean, the food that we're eating is just not good. We're not preparing it enough. Even the best food that we get, still probably sprayed in all sorts of things. You can get organic, non-GMO. You can get something that's organic, but it can be sprayed 5 minutes later once they pick it. We don't eat fresh for the most part anymore. Something's picked across the world, goes on a boat, sits over there, gets sprayed some more, goes in your supermarket. You pick it up, then you eat it 3 days later. Like, if you pick something off a plant, how many days is it good for? If you pick a berry off a plant, when does it go bad? Like 2-3 days, right? Done. So how are we getting food from all over the world and it still looks perfect in the supermarket? They're doing stuff to it, right? So it doesn't mean that you shouldn't eat that, but it's just, no matter how good of a food we choose, it's not perfect food anymore. So if you're choosing foods that are filled with chemicals, preservatives, prepackaged, dyes, tons of sugar, then those foods don't have barely any nutrients, if any nutrients at all. So there's no way that we're going to be healthy. How can you be healthy if you don't have the nutrients that your body needs? We're literally built of what we eat. And if we don't give ourselves the nutrition that we need, then it's not a surprise that we're sick. And you add to that chemicals and toxins that we're being exposed to. So when you go back to how important is food, it's everything. It's the most important thing. You cannot be healthy if you don't have nutrients. If you put a fish in a bowl, right, and you can give a fish as much medication as you want to, but if the fish water is dirty, they're not going to be healthy. Like, you have to clean up the environment. You have to clean up what's going into the fish. We're the same thing. We need good food. We need sunlight, and we need to not be exposed to a million toxins.
Yeah. And what do you think about needing to look at the, you have spoke about this, so I'm leading you into this, but about looking at the ingredients themselves, because what I see often is complete confusion or even the extremes of what you were talking about before. So let's say, for example, a conversation about sugar, right? So instead of saying, we need to control sugar, or look at the type of sugar. So high fructose corn syrup is not the same thing as raw sugar, natural formed sugars, or, molasses and things like that, and where you have a parent go, no sugar, period. But our body needs sugar. So it's just extremes in ideas instead of growing awareness. How would you recommend a parent, like I think sugar in particular is the one that has the worst rap and the most confusion. But what do you see as one that parents need to focus on, where they need to grow their awareness more as opposed to just being an extremist about it?
Great point. So I always say, people always say, oh, what's the one tip that you give? The one tip that I always give, there is one thing that you could change right now. It's to read labels. It's to read every label you get from now on for everything that you buy, especially when it comes to food, because it's not that hard to purchase better. If you just look at the label and you look for words that you actually know what they are, then it's likely to be pretty decent. If you're buying some long, chemically, you know, methyl tetra, whatever, if you don't even know what it is, it's probably not good for you. It's probably some sort of preservative. So just try to avoid that as much as possible. And if you buy things like, you know, almonds and dates and this and that, like it's much more likely to be a better food. And if you're choosing between two options, just choose the thing with ingredients that you actually know what they are. You know, that's an easy first step. And if you do that for everything that you buy, then it doesn't necessarily have to be more expensive, but you know you're getting better foods in general, and you're putting better nutrition into your kids and into your family, and that's going to go a long way. And I agree. I think sugar is, you know, one of the biggest concerns, but that's because it's added to so much, and it's added
and high fructose corn syrup is sugar, and really it's not. And so the definitions of what certain foods are have been marketed as opposed to just being spoken about plainly, right? So I think complex carbohydrates are one, and oils in particular. I mean, especially like seed oils, and I mean, not oils are not made the same, and sugars are not made the same. And so it's not really just about cutting out all sugar, because that's not healthy either, but actually cutting out bad sugar or cutting out bad carbohydrates or bad oils. And because, I mean, we've seen fats all the time, right? And they do lead to health issues when they go into extremes.
Yeah, I mean, they can if you eat unhealthy fats and you eat it a lot and you're eating processed foods. But there are plenty of people around the world and throughout history that mostly ate fat, and they did great, and they were, you know, even healthier than we are now. And everything, these things get bad raps, and you know, I think that if you look back at history, fat got a very bad rap because, you know, the sugar industry and the dairy, all these different things kind of pushed it in that direction away from what it was. But yeah, you're not trying to avoid sugar, right? Sugar's in fruit and sugar's in all sorts. But you are trying to avoid, I don't know, getting a frappuccino that has, like, you know, this much sugar in it every single day. If you have it once, fine, you know, it's not a big deal. But it's cumulative. We're getting so much sugar in everything, and it's artificial sugar. It's not good quality sugar. It's not made from dates or from fruit or anything like that. It's the stuff that they make in a lab, and you are getting your, you know, daily intake of what you should get at every single bite that you take, and all the foods that, you know, you don't need very much, and yet, like, every single thing has, you know, 20 grams, 50 grams, whatever it is. You're getting a ton of sugar in one drink or one bar or one whatever it is, and it's like, how can your body handle all that? There's just no way. So if you're just mindful of this, if you just look and try to get things that are low sugar, use natural sugars, then you're gonna be so much farther along, because basically nobody needs any more. We get plenty, right? So it's all about moderation and about trying to keep your diet balanced. And when people ask me about fruits and vegetables and getting sugars and, let's say, fruit, I'm not so worried about that. I mean, if you're eating like 1 million fruit every day, fine, but who's doing that? If you're eating a regular amount of fruit, I wouldn't be worried about that. It's the stuff that's in your cereals and your snack bars and your preserved foods and your fast food. That's where you're going to go wrong. And I think, and if you cut most of that out and you eat real food, then you're going to be 99% of the way there.
Absolutely. I think that's I mean, having common sense understanding of food is really what's missing, right? And really marketing and how much marketing has changed simple definitions of ingredients doesn't help. But parents can become smarter and avoid very simply by creating more awareness about the difference of the ingredients themselves. And I think that was so important, and you cover that often. Exactly. Fruit is not evil. Honey is not evil. Brown sugar is not evil. And there's plenty of oils that are not evil, right? But a lot of the percentages in food, I'm reading some of the comments, you guys. I agree with you guys. I love that you guys agree with this topic. All right, so let's move on. So holistic care. So holistic care is something that parents want to explore more, but they don't know how. And I do agree with what you said. So holistic care is not bad, but some practitioners are. Right? So where do you think a holistic practitioner is valid, or maybe can be used or should be used? And maybe what are some warning signs? Like, you should not use this guy.
Yeah,
Girl.
great question. So the first thing I think is you have to identify what a holistic practitioner means or what an integrative practitioner means, because the difficult thing is that means a lot of different things to different people. There is no one specific definition, and there's such a wide range of what could be considered an integrative practitioner, right? Because you can have a doctor who practices some integrative medicine. You could have a naturopathic doctor who went to naturopathic school, not medical school, and they're performing that. You can have a chiropractor that also is interested in natural medicine, so does some of that. You can have like Chinese medicine doctors that do acupuncture. You could have health coaches. Like, there's all sorts of things out there that are kind of under the umbrella. So one, you have to identify what it is you're looking for in terms of what you want them to do and what you want them to be. And two, you want to identify what kind of claims they're making. Anyone that has outlandish claims, everything, this is the cure-all for everything, that's not ideal. You want practitioners that look into your history, have a good understanding and education in the field that you're needing them to be in the field of, depending on what you're looking them to do, and then have discussions with them and come up with a plan that makes sense within their wheelhouse. If somebody's doing everything, that's probably not a good idea. Practitioners that I find that are really good know what they're good at and know how to work as a team, and kind of work with you. Now, as it comes to me, as being a doctor, there are good doctors and bad doctors. There are good natural practitioners and not good natural practitioners. So you have to be mindful of that regardless of who you go to. You have to be mindful of how the communication that they have with you. What is their training? What's their background? What kind of time do they spend with you? What are the plans that they're going to be using? And do you agree with those? Because some practitioners are going to use homeopathy. Some are going to use supplements. Some are going to use medication. Some are going to use, it depends what they are. If you want to go to someone who does acupuncture, but they're not an acupuncturist, they're probably not going to do a very good job, right? So you want to go to someone that has 40 years of training in Chinese medicine. That's who's going to do a better job with that than someone who's just says that they are.
Okay, so very specialized holistic practitioners that know how to work well with doctors, as opposed to say, I have all the answers, do this for absolutely everything. Okay, so what other, I think we kind of spoke about this, but what, because the impetus, so the reason why parents want to go to holistic practitioners is because pills and, like you said, antibiotics, maybe surgeries are the go-to, right? And sometimes that's where the frustration is. So what exactly is something that you would say you do want to take the intervention that is Western medicine, as opposed to, or modern medicine, as opposed to a holistic practitioner? So something that you saw once come in your practice where a parent was like, I'm going holistic, and you're like, no, don't do it.
Right. No, that is a great question. So acute issues, right? Acute issues meaning emergencies, severe illnesses. There is very little in natural medicine that works really fast or is really hardcore in terms of like a medication. It's not the same thing, right? Most things that are natural are long-term, low amounts. They come from food or from herbs. They're generally not going to be something that's going to be the right choice to be the only thing in an emergency. Medicine does an amazing job, I think, at urgent care and emergency situations. Like you have a broken limb, you need a surgery, you're bleeding, in your brain. It's like those kinds of things. It's probably not the time to take an herb because you're having a brain bleed, right? It's like you need an MRI and you maybe need surgery. So, or similar situation like an asthma exacerbation, right? So kids having serious trouble breathing. That's not the time to do herbs. That's the time where you need albuterol. That's the time we need a medication. You can also do the herbs. You can also do the other things. That's great. But those are usually not going to work in an emergency situation, or I guess maybe like you swallow a peanut and you're anaphylactic, right? You need your EpiPen, right? You're not going to go and you're not going to take an herb because you're not going to last that long, right? Like that's where those situations where, yeah, it's good. You can take your supplements in the long run to decrease or minimize your risks, but in an urgent situation, emergency type situation, that is where medicine is at its finest, I think, right now. And you have to be balanced, and you have to trust the system, because they will save your life, and then you can go back to doing your herbs. But that it's important. I think it is that we balance both worlds. And also, I think the other big one is in obstetrics and in having babies, right? If you think about how high of a mortality rate there was for moms and babies hundreds of years ago, I mean, that number is almost none now, right? It's very, very low compared to what it used to be, which was very high. Like, I don't know, more than 50% of people in childbirth would die, right? Like, it's a huge percentage, and not anymore, right? So it doesn't mean there aren't good ways that you can do things naturally, but there's also times, if you work with a midwife, where they're now at the point where they're smart enough to say, like, okay, well, this is not the situation where I should be here. You can go to the hospital, right? Like, this baby is in trouble, and they need medical care. And so there is a time for natural, but there's also a time for medical. And there are a lot of things that we've improved a lot over the last 100 years or 200 years or 1,000 years. And so things that would kill you a few years ago don't anymore. So you can choose not to get medical care, but you also might be choosing when you need medical care to save your life, and you can do the natural stuff later. So I think it's a balance of both worlds, and I don't see that as a problem. And I don't know why both can't coexist. There is no reason to me that you can't do both.
Yeah, and I like your recommendation because I think that's exactly how it should line up, where emergency or very in the moment needs are just the strength that Western medicine has, and Eastern medicine or more holistic approaches are more long-term preventative and have a full body, full life kind of view that is more long-term than Western medicine might, right? Yeah. But they each have their strengths and their weaknesses if misapplied.
I agree.
Right?
Totally. I think that it comes down to the practitioner and the situation and you, but the future of health and medicine is teamwork. It's doing these things together. There is no reason why doctors can't work with natural practitioners. There's no reason why you can't go to your pediatrician and your naturopathic doctor, and you have an emergent thing, you just make sure it's not cancer. The naturopath's not going to know that, right? They didn't get trained in what to look for to identify if it is cancer or an autoimmune disease. The doctor did. And there's good training in that. A cardiologist is not thinking about your brain, but you're really happy that you have a cardiologist if you have a heart attack, right? Like they're super specially trained, but it doesn't mean that they're going to know all the natural stuff that you could do to prevent heart attacks for the next 20 years. They're not trained in that, right? So both of these things are good, and you can use them in their situation. But I think understanding what the training is and what people are specialized in is going to go a long way. And I think medicine becoming a little bit more humble will also help with that, because I think that if a cardiologist realizes that they're really good at doing interventional cardiology and saving you from your heart attack, then that's great. But maybe they don't know that much about how to live a healthy lifestyle to prevent the heart attack in the first place. And maybe they'll learn a little bit more, but maybe that's just not their passion. So they'll be happy to work with a coach who can give you nutritional advice and spend 2 hours with you. Why can't you do that? Why does the doctor have to do it? They don't.
Yeah, I love that you said that the future of medicine is more balanced and integrating both. I really, truly believe that. I also think that the future of medicine is a stronger patient advocacy, including parents, and being a lot more involved, and communication is definitely the way. And so before I actually ask you the last question, a parent just jumped in with a really good question on autism and autistic kids, in particular ABA therapy. I'm not sure if you know or have an answer for that in particular, but if you could please give some recommendations for a parent dealing with autism. Anything that comes off the top of your head.
Yeah, so autism's complex because I think it's many things. I think it's not just one thing. Autism's a diagnosis at the end of the day, but there are many reasons why you will have certain symptoms that would give you the autism spectrum disorder. And there are kids at a wide range. Autism is a spectrum, right? So there's kids that are very functional and kids that are not very functional. There's adults, that are functional, not so functional. So I think it depends on what your symptoms are, and you need to identify what your goals are and find practitioners that can work towards those goals. For kids that are, fairly functional, then it may be more in terms of doing behavior therapies, working on their nutrition, thinking about what might be exacerbating some of their symptoms, and seeing if there are things that you can do. I've definitely seen situations where kids get a diagnosis of autism, and they work with natural practitioners to go through their lifestyle and their diet and the things that they're doing in their life, and they clean those things up, and they are more mindful of some of that, and then the symptoms improve. And maybe they don't lose their autism diagnosis. Sometimes kids do, but if you think about the foundations and you think about the things that you do have some control over, then yes, sometimes you can see changes and see things move in a different direction. And we have to be open to that too. Sometimes not. Some things are just genetic, and they are what they are, and you do the best that you can. But even still, even if it's genetic, there are always things that everybody can do. There's not a human being on this planet that can't do some things to improve their health and improve their resilience, short of those that like live maybe on a commune, farm somewhere in the mountains, grow all their own food and they do their own thing, but then they have other issues. So, there's always some give and take. But at the end of the day, we can all be a little bit more mindful of the food that we eat and try to minimize our toxins. There's no harm in doing that, no matter who you are. It doesn't matter. There's no, I don't know why anybody would be opposed to that.
Yeah. And just quickly to give a synopsis for people who aren't as aware, with autism, there are some ingredients in foods that can help make behaviors worse or certain symptoms worse. And so watching for those particular ingredients, or even detoxing those particular ingredients, has helped kids. Like Dr. Gator has said, it does not help all kids. It does not help completely remove certain symptoms, but it can be helpful, and so it's something you can look into with your doctor or practitioner. Okay, so if you have anything else to add.
No, as I said, that's exactly correct. And again, whether that's going to solve all your problems, probably not, but it almost never hurts, right? And it certainly doesn't hurt to try and to look at it and see if you can notice some improvements. And again, at the end of the day, regardless of any of this, if you remove the dyes and the chemicals and most of the sugar, those kinds of things from your diet, and for some kids, gluten and dairy and whatever it may be for you that's causing inflammation, if you minimize it or try to find more healthy versions of it, then that's going to be helpful for basically everybody. You're going to have a better gut health. You're going to get sick less. Some of your symptoms might improve. Maybe you have eczema or rashes that are going to improve. If you can figure out the things that trigger you, that trigger your inflammation, then if you minimize those things, then you're going to feel better. That's not that complicated. That's common sense. It's just figure out what causes inflammation and minimize it. It's different for everybody.
Yeah. I got an amazing question in the chat. What is a supplement that you would recommend for kids where there is an issue of a mineral deficiency or a deficiency of some kind that you see often, right? Is there anything in particular you see often that parents would be best supplementing?
The biggest deficiency we see in medicine is vitamin D these days. I mean, nobody gets enough sunlight, or most people don't get enough sunlight. And so if you're going to supplement anything, that's usually the thing to do. For sure, it's good to get more sunlight, but it depends on where you live. You may or may not be able to do it, but we evolved in the sun, right? And then we moved to cold locations, and we work inside, and we're on the computer, and we drive in cars, and we wear lots of clothes, and we've done a lot of things that have minimized the vitamin D that we get from the sun. So almost everybody that you test is vitamin D deficient. So number one, get outside more, but number two, if you're going to supplement with one thing, that's probably the number one vitamin deficiency.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that was a great question from a parent. Thank you. All right, so what is to close out, what is the number one recommendation that you would have or give a parent that would make the biggest change? Is that about diet, or what would you say you would recommend one thing a person or a parent would change for their kids?
Yeah, I would go back to reading food labels. I would say that is the one thing that everybody can do. It's a simple thing to do. It's going to give you the most bang for your buck, because you're going to be thinking at every single purchase, what am I purchasing? What am I putting into my family's body? And as you start to get used to it and just turning over those labels, then you'll see very quickly, like, I didn't realize that was in there. I didn't realize there was that much sugar in here. I didn't realize that they used red dye number, whatever. You're going to be like, okay, so let me buy the cereal that doesn't have that right beside it. Like, there are little changes that you can do, and you're going to be like, oh, I thought that was going to be way more expensive. It's actually the same price. Oh, this one's cheaper and it has better ingredients. You don't you don't need to throw everything out of your house and start all over again and, just eat kale every day. That's not what you have to do. But you do have to be mindful, and I don't think we can make excuses anymore about being too busy or it's too expensive. These are too important that we have to, within our means, find ways to get healthier food for our family and cook it more and spend the time that we can with it, whatever within our reason of what we can do. Because again, going back to how we started, 50% of kids have a chronic disease, and that number is going up. So if you don't want your kid to have a chronic disease, you have to be mindful of these things. If you are not, then they are going to have a chronic disease if they don't already. That's just how it is. So we just be mindful of that. And it doesn't have to be scary. You don't have to change everything. But if you just one little thing at a time, think about what you're purchasing, then every little bit helps. And that matters over 10 or 20 years. It makes a big difference if every single thing you purchase is just a little bit better. Then that's just a few chemicals that they're not getting in their body every single day for 10 or 20 years. That matters. That adds up. Think about if you were, I don't know, eating a little piece of lead paint. You eat one, you're probably okay. But you eat it every day for the next 10 years, that's going to be a problem eventually, right? And that's what we're doing with our food.
Yeah, I absolutely love that recommendation. I think it is probably the most actionable, practical advice. I really did love, so this is my favorite, how important antibiotics are, your perspective on antibiotics, because I think long-term, that's something we're not considering. I mean, kids are given antibiotics, like you said, for I don't know how many times every flu season, and how much that impacts their gut, and long-term, how much it impacts the future antibiotics effectiveness is not something, I mean, I don't consider that, or, it's not something that parents consider, right? So I really love that takeaway. So everybody, if you want more of this information from Dr. Gator, please head over to his site, check out his course in his program, and I'm going to give you a few minutes to kind of close out, but it's such important practical information that I hope you guys follow him, and I hope you guys take a look at what he's offering. I mean, it covers a lot of the questions that I saw in the chat, so please.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Yeah, if you want to follow me, then just Dr. Joel Gator, or I have a lot of different programs at raisingamazingplus.com, so you can go there. And I have a free vaccine handout there, so if you sign up, you could grab that. And then there's also the course. So the course is the natural parenting course. So it goes through shots, and it also goes through a lot of the stuff that we talked about, actually, with how to choose the practitioner. These are the questions that I get a lot of. So just, how do you choose a practitioner that is more naturally minded? What do you do if you have questions? And how do you speak to your doctor who's not so naturally minded of things? So that course is in there, if somebody wants it. But yeah, and you can always reach out to me on here.
Yeah, I mean, parents need to be stronger advocates for our health, and that is the future. And I love doctors like you that are helping pave that way, especially with bringing in Western and Eastern philosophies and practices. Holistic medicine really needs, like you said, to be a balanced approach and have some more space and conversations, just so that Western medicine has some of the tension lifted off of it and some more openness in terms of conversation and stuff like that. Western medicine shines and has its place that, there's so much progress that we've made. You don't even need to defend it, right? But there needs to be some more balance so that health can be, again, at the forefront. And I love champions like you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please head over to his site and look at everything he has to offer. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everybody.